Geoff Barker, Rock and Roll, Sunday night on the BBC. Here we go with our regular feature, My First Rock and Roll Record, where you get a chance to come on the show, tell us what your first rock and roll record was, or the first one that really got you into music, into rock and roll, and you can introduce it. This week, it's one that I just love because it's from the era that, if you were around at the time, the classic rockabilly 70s. And it's great that we're going to play one of those wonderful tracks that we didn't get to hear until years after it was released in America. So let's get all the details from Paul Wallace in Romford. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Geoff. How are you doing, my friend? It's lovely to speak to you.
You too. You're a bus driver. Is that on London Transport?
It is indeed, for my sins, yes. London buses up and down.
Excellent. I bet it's been busy this summer, hasn't it?
Yeah, to be fair, mate, it's busy all the time. It's one of them jobs where you just constant flow of people and can make your head spin quite a bit, you know, with not just with passengers, but with pedestrians and, and cyclists and everything else in London, you can imagine.
I wouldn't want to drive a bus through London. I don't like driving through London at all if I can possibly avoid it. But I just gave a little clue to when we first got to hear this record. As I said, it was one that burst on the scene and was a massive favourite to rockabilly fans in the 70s, but it was actually recorded in the USA, in Nashville, back in 1956. Now, you said this, you first discovered it on what is a rather tatty, obscure LP that your dad had?
Well, he had a collection of records, but he was more really into the old croony stuff, like your Frank Sinatra's and your Perry Como, Bing Crosby. That was all the kind of stuff that was in this. We had this massive radiogram, I think they called it, in the front room. It looked like a big coffin laying in there.
Yeah. And
you used to open the top and you had the record player in there and the radio and a little compartment for your vinyl LPs. And that's where my dad kept his albums, and my dad wasn't one of these that really looked after stuff that well, so a lot of them hadn't survived that well. But in amongst it, there was an album. It was a rock and roll compilation, and it was on one of these kind of, like Ronco
K-Tel, yeah, I remember them well.
It had been in there so long, the actual original cover, I don't know what it looked like because it disappeared, it deteriorated. It was just in its white vinyl, the white paper sleeve, and I actually drawn on it with crayons, rock and roll and stuff, you know, just to kind of make this record feel a little bit more at home in between Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra. My dad used to play it a few times and that, and it really grabbed me because I wasn't really paying much attention as a 7-8-year-old listening to the crooning stuff. And it was one of these albums that it had all the old hits on it, the standards, your shake, rattle and rolls. But this track, this is the one that really introduced me to rock and roll.
Well, as I said, those of us who were on the rock and roll scene, and the rock and roll fans at the time, DJs, discovered this record. It was released and recorded in the USA in 1956. It appeared and got a release in Britain in 1976, 20 years later, which I have to say was almost entirely due to the actions of a wonderful DJ, sadly no longer with us, who was on Capital Radio, called Roger Scott. Now, Roger did an afternoon show on Capital Radio, and like everyone listened to it, but on Friday night he had a rock and roll show, about 6 o'clock in the evening, I think, called Cruising, and he played this to death, and he used to have a thing on his show called The Hit Line. People could phone up, vote for their favourite song, and on a Friday he'd play the one that was most voted for that week, and he got to number 1 on The Hit Line in London. Now, had Roger been on Radio 1 at the time, I'm absolutely convinced, and played it, and others had as well on the station, it would have been another jungle rock. It would have been a massive pop crossover hit because it's had that potential.
It's funny because, I mean, I was born in 1971, so when I heard this, it must have been around about 78, 79 sort of time, I'm guessing. And, I mean, it was at 10 years old was the age I went out and bought my very first 45 single, which was This Old House by Shakin' Stevens. To this very day, I'm still a massive Shakin' Stevens fan. I actually run the biggest fan group for him on Facebook. So as much as I would love to say that This Old House was my first sort of like record that brought me into rock and roll, when I thought about it, it wasn't. And it was actually
this one,
the one that we're going to hear soon, yeah. And, you know, I liked it because I think at that sort of age, it had very playful lyrics, and it just had a lovely guitar riff, and it was sung very joyfully, and I don't know, it just grabbed me as a little kid, and I just really remember the track, and probably once people listen to it, they're going to know why. It's the sort of thing that would appeal to a child.
You mentioned your huge Shaky page you've got. How long's that been running?
Well, we've been running quite a number of years now. It's called Shaky Now, the Definitive Fan Group. If anybody wants to find us on Facebook, they're welcome to join us, because we do actually talk about a lot of the rock and roll stars on there, and obviously everyone who's affiliated with Shaky your Albert Lees, your Stuart Colemans, the list is endless. Once Facebook kind of took over on the social media side, we moved on to that, and it just grew and grew and grew worldwide, which is very nice. And it's just nice to know that there's a lot of people out there that are still very much into it, and obviously Shaky's still going as an artist today. I know you've championed his last album.
Paul, do you want to say hi to anyone before you introduce the tune?
Thanks to everybody who's bothered to tune in and listen to me pick this tune of mine, because I have let the people on the Shaky fan base know, because they're big fans of yours as well, Geoff. So you've quite mentioned a lot on there anyway, and there's often links to your show on there. So it's quite nice for me to be featured on there and give them something to have a listen to and a bit of a laugh to. I'm pretty sure a lot of them were thinking that I was going to pick a Shakin' Stevens track, but as much as Shaky is my favourite rock and roll artist, it wasn't actually the first artist that I heard that really brought me to rock and roll, and this one is it.
Okay, great to talk to you, Paul. Paul Wallace in Romford, tell us, what was your first influential rock and roll record?
My first rock and roll record was a track called Barking Up the Wrong Tree by Don Woody.
Well, I went to my baby on bended knee. I said, baby, will you marry me? She said, sorry, daddy, but what can I say? I found a new love just the other day, and you're barking up the wrong tree. Well, you're barking up the wrong tree. Yes, you're barking up the wrong tree. That's what she said to me. Well, I pleaded and I begged, nearly out of my mind. I said, baby girls are hard to find. She said, sorry, daddy, try to understand. I'm going with the cutest guy in the land, and you're barking up the wrong tree. Well, you're barking up the wrong tree. Yes, you're barking up the wrong tree. That's what she said to me. My heart was broken and I felt so blue. I said, baby, does it make me went through? She said, sorry, daddy, well, can't you take a hint? My guy's got money, more than a mint, and you're barking up the wrong tree. Well, you're barking up the wrong tree. Yes, you're barking up the wrong tree. That's what she said to me. Other day that my baby had gone away. She took all his money and she left him flat. And let me tell you, people, I'm so glad that I was barking up the wrong tree. Well, you're barking up the wrong tree. Yes, you're barking up the wrong tree. That's what she said to me.
If you've got a dog at home, I hope he's going potty at the moment. I remember playing, I used to turn the dog bits. I got told off by the boss on a previous radio station because someone phoned up and complained the dog was going mental. Don Woody, Barking Up the Wrong Tree, with a great guitar from Grady Martin, recorded in Nashville in 1956. 20 years later, it's impossible to understate how big a record that was on the British rock and roll scene. You heard it everywhere, all the clubs, everybody played it, and dear old Roger Scott did his best to make it a hit. He made it a big hit in London, made it number one in London. It surely would have been a hit around the rest of the country. Thank you, Paul Wallace in Romford, for bringing that to our attention and telling us your great story. And Shaky Now is his website, his Facebook page, if you want to join that. And there's a link to that on the Facebook page for this show, facebook.com/Geoff Barker Rock and Roll. If you would like to come on and choose your first rock and roll record, it's simple. Just drop me a line, send me an email, rockandroll@bbc.co.uk, or you can write to My First Rock and Roll Record, Geoff Barker, BBC Radio, PL3 5YQ. Most important, you put your phone number on there, please, so I can phone you up and we can talk about it. Whether you are a first generation or in the 70s or even more recently, it doesn't matter. Whatever was the first one you either bought or the first one you remember hearing that got you into rock and roll, do let me know, and you could be on the show very, very soon.